Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Under the Radar with Tim Peacock, where this time we are revisiting a post-punk era classic with a cinematic twist. The record in question, Nosferatu, was first released late in 1979, and while it's often referred to as the Stranglers' original frontman Hugh Cornwell's debut solo record, it's actually a collaboration between Cornwell and drummer Robert Williams. The latter is probably best known for his playing on Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band albums Shiny Beast, Bat Chain Puller, and Dock at the Radar Station. With hindsight, it might seem strange that Hugh Cornwell should make a solo record, while the Stranglers were arguably at the peak of their powers in the late 1970s. In fact, when Nosferatu was recorded early in 1979, the Men in Black were on the back of 3 consecutive gold-selling albums, Ratus Nevegicus, No More Heroes and Black and White, all of which made the top 5 of the UK album chart. However, Cornwell's decision to make a solo record was at least partly practical, not least because record labels then still thought of punk as a passing fad, and didn't believe the bands associated with the movement would last. Polydor Records, for example, only really threw their weight behind the Jam after Paul Weller and Company scored a second consecutive gold disc with Setting Suns late in 1979, and the Stranglers had a similar problem with United Artists, owned by EMI. Even though the Sorry Quartet had established themselves as an important band with a huge and loyal fan base, their label still urged both Cornwell and bassist vocalist J.J. Bennell to consider solo releases, as they felt the Stranglers would die off after punk. Of course, the Stranglers never had any intention of splitting, but both men still worked up solo releases regardless. Burnell's Euroman Cometh arrived first in April 1979, with Cornwell's Nosferatu following in November of that year. Both records contain plenty to recommend, though there's something especially dark and sinister about Nosferatu that sets it apart today. Cornwell and Robert Williams decided to record together after Cornwell, a confirmed Captain Beefheart fan, had seen Williams perform with Beefheart's Magic Band during a 3-night run in San Francisco. Cornwell and Williams were introduced after one of the shows and made a mooted collaboration a reality, with Cornwell flying to Los Angeles to record most of Nosferatu with Williams and Frank Zappa's studio engineer Joe Ciccarelli. As its title hints, Nosferatu was originally conceived as Cornwell and Williams' attempt to score the soundtrack for F.W. Murnau's 1922 silent film of the same name. This was a groundbreaking vampire-themed movie based upon the German director's adaptation of Bram Stoker's legendary Dracula. Nosferatu came housed in a sleeve bearing a still from the film and bearing a dedication to the memory of actor Max Schreck, who played the movie's lead role as the vampire Count Orlok. Its frantic titular song, sung and mostly performed by Williams, with Cornwell adding guitar, was also inspired by the film, though after that the initial concept dissipates somewhat, with the songs instead addressing a number of subjects that fascinated Cornwell at the time. These ranged from his oblique reflections of watching experimental rockers Henry Cow perform live on Irate Caterpillar, to Big Bug's elliptical impressions of the war train belonging to Russian revolutionary Leon Trotsky, a divisive figure Cornwell had previously referenced on the Stranglers' hit single No More Heroes. Sonically, Nosferatu still sounds original and also extremely fresh. Instead of hiring a band per se, Cornwell and Williams performed most of the music as a duo, with one or the other handling bass and/or keyboards. Williams' drumming is never less than inventive, while Cornwell's love of Captain Beefheart is frequently reflected by the song's tight, yet off-kilter time signatures and his choppy guitar figures on tracks such as Mothra and the cocaine and paranoia-related Wired. Elsewhere, the creepy Losers in a Lost Land, a sister piece of sorts to the Stranglers' Dead Los Angeles, has a brooding, after-hours feel entirely fitting for a record piece together from nocturnal sessions in numerous LA studios. Though very much the product of 2 like-minded musicians, Nosferatu also benefits from cameos from a bunch of well-chosen special guests. Cornwell and Williams supplied the Stranglers' US label mates Devo with the musical framework for Rhythmic Itch and gave the Ohio band carte blanche, and they turned it into a quirk pop masterpiece on its own terms. Elsewhere, Ian Dury, credited as Duncan Poundcake, appears as the fairground barker on the brilliantly eccentric Wrong Way Round, while the Clash's Mick Jones adds backing vocals to the record's closing track, Puppets. Another of Nosferatu's strongest tracks, an angular cover of Cream's 1968 hit White Room, was chosen as Nosferatu's trailer single, but while it was promoted with a great monochromatic video, it failed to trouble the charts. A fate which also befell Nosferatu, which sold surprisingly slowly on release. In retrospect, the fact it came out shortly after the Stranglers' superb fourth album, The Raven, may well have hampered its commercial progress. It took Hugh Cornwell the best part of a decade to follow up Nosferatu with his next venture outside the Stranglers, 1988's Wolf. However, he's steadily pursued a solo career since quitting the band in 1990 and has released some of his best titles over the past 2 decades, with Hoover Dam, Totem and Taboo and the excellent Monster all ranking among his very best. Nosferatu, though, still has a vibe all its own, and it's gradually established itself as a fan favourite. Indeed, at the time of this recording, Cornwell is performing it in full during his latest UK tour. Catch Nosferatu live if you can, but if not, then return to the source and let this dark, seductive record send some very welcome chills down your spine. So that's all for this episode of Under the Radar with Tim Peacock. Tune in next time when we'll be reappraising a record from one of rock's biggest stars, which met with an undeserved critical mauling on release in the early 1990s.